Alright, welcome to the channel. Today we'll be talking about the TOPPING Centaurus, and this was sent out by Apos Audio. They're not asking me to say or do anything other than my honest opinion regarding the TOPPING Centaurus. So the TOPPING Centaurus is a collaboration to some degree with the Holo Audio crew. They basically are using the same R2R chip that the Cyan2 uses, I believe. So correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just the Holo Audio's R2R chip that they're using in their Cyan2. Outside of that one piece, I don't believe there's anything else that is the same as far as components used, as far as to my knowledge. So take that into account. It's going to have a different sound signature to some degree than the Cyan2, and they come in, the TOPPING Centaurus comes in price wise, I believe a couple $100 cheaper than the Cyan2. But we'll dive into all that a little bit later, but first let's dive right into build and aesthetics and the display and how it works. Alright, so on to build and aesthetics, the lovely TOPPING Centaurus. And this comes with a bunch of accessories. You get your lovely USB. I don't have it out right here right now, and I don't have this plugged in yet, but it does have a little Bluetooth antenna that just screws in right up there on that little red spot. It has a coaxial spot there. Let's see here. You have your basic trigger outs. It has, like I said, AES, Bluetooth, optical, the LVDS, lovely left and right for your analog, and balanced outs, so, or RCA and balanced outs. That's more or less the back side. The underside is obviously it's cold, so it's going to grab fingerprints or whatnot, humidity kind of thing going on really bad there. But underside, basic feet. I actually like these. They have a nice little stickiness and tackiness to them. Nothing too crazy. It does still slide decently if you push it around, but it's got a nice grab to it. So that's the back. Sides are basic. Everything's pretty basic outside of that until you get to the front. But it is aluminum, and it's pretty decent there. Before we jump into the front of it, I wanted to kind of showcase the controller here, and this is just a AAA, almost dropped that, AAA powered little plastic remote. Little button sounds, kind of like almost like popping. Like I really like the sound and the tactile feel of the remote itself. It's actually kind of nice. Dig that. Though it is plastic, it's, you know, basic remote, basic topping remote. On to the front side here. So you have the front plate here, which is now got my fingerprints and palm prints all over it. But you have your power and select buttons here, or power select dual purpose button there. You have the select up and down, but you can kind of see it there, is it has touch sensitive or capacitive sensitive home and different select and menu buttons that are actually capacitive. And when you're looking at this when it's turned on, which I'll showcase here in a little bit, it's hard to see those, so you just have to remember where they are. So like menu, select, and home. But that's more or less the front end of the build of the Centaurus by TOPPING. Alright, so going over the menu buttons, you have your kind of VU meter here, and if you hit the home button, you can actually go through the different options here. So that's your VU meter as well, like the traditional one. And then back to the main one. Go into menu, you have your different options of display, which kind of goes through all the different, settings for brightness, etc., the color that you want. I personally like Purple Magic because purple, and it's a delight. Anyhow, so back from there, we go menu, input select obviously goes through the whole gamut of what is on the back for inputs, so coax, AES, IIS, Bluetooth, USB, optical. Down here, output, you have RCA and or balanced, or XLR, and then all, so you can do them all at once. I prefer to keep it to what is actually being utilized. PEQ configurations, also something I do not use, so not something I mess with. Advanced, you go channel balance, you can actually change the balance between, you know, left, right, and center. DAC mode would be DAC. Pre, those are two options. I kept it in DAC. Then oversampling, there is best, NOS, and OS. I stuck to mostly best and NOS, but overall I did find best to be a little bit better. Nothing crazy, but it just had a little bit more fullness to it. Felt like nothing that was like massive differences or departures from the other two. And also in OS mode, I kept it at one time because I'm not a big oversampling person, even though I used the best. And then I just kept it at one time, but it goes all the way up to 16, I believe. Actually, the rest of these I pretty much didn't change. They all were what they were, and I did not mess with it at all. So back to return, and that is the more or less outside of language, factory reset, return. And then that's more or less the menu setup for the Topping Centaurus. All right, so before we jump into sound, actually, I wanted to touch on some of the differences in the design, or what the differences are from the Cyan2 to the Topping Centaurus. So some of the big things you're going to have are the fact that you have a lot more, I guess you could say, functionality or technology put into the Centaurus, in the sense you got the Bluetooth, you have the different inputs and outputs as far as like controlling those. Like you actually can physically go in with either the remote or go in with the on the box controls to actually, you know, change things up how you want, whereas the Cyan2 kind of is meant to be taking all that away from you, and you just it does its things. You plug it in and you go. You don't think about it, you just let it do its thing. So this one you have a little more control over, like the inputs, outputs, and the different variances there. As far as that goes, that's more or less the biggest differences outside of the internal components and design ethos, as far as like how it's been all put together. I believe the Cyan2 has a lot different components and some proprietary things that are still unique to the Cyan2. So let's dive into sound. All right, so for sound, I mostly was using, obviously, the Topping Centaurus. I did compare it against, I don't have a Cyan2 here, but I have my Spring 3 back there. I was using that in comparison, and it's not the same as the Cyan2. It's obviously the next big step up, so take that into account. Summary of my take on this is that this does not fully have that richness or smoothness that the Cyan2 has, or the Spring 3. There is definitely some kind of, I mean, you can go into the audio magic and say the je ne sais quoi kind of thing that this is lacking comparatively to them. But to my ears, I was picking up that this one leans a little more bright, just slightly. It definitely has the dynamics. It definitely is smooth, but there's just something there in the warmth, I think, because there's not that much warmth, or that's lacking in warmth comparatively to the Cyan2 and or to the Spring 3. So take that into account. But outside of those things, the detail, the imaging, and everything else was really, really fantastic, actually. In fact, I would say for under $1,000, this thing is definitely the thing to keep an eye on, and one to beat. I think if you want a little more richness and a little more like kind of just that little bit of audiophile magic, I would go with the Spring or the Cyan2. Probably, preferably the Cyan2 would be the better comparison of the two, I would say. But if you want more control like that, this is the thing to get, because you want to be able to control how things are, you know, input, output, that kind of stuff. But if you want to just buy something that's going to sound fantastic and has a little more warmth to it, and that's from my ears, and that's kind of where I think is what's missing in this one. But it's not like a massive difference, but it's enough to where I noticed. I would go with the Cyan2 over this if you want just to put something in your chain and forget about it and just go and have just fantastic DAC. Like, it's amazing. But this one is as well, like, right up there. The imaging and the stage was pretty dang good as far as like how much you get out of that from a DAC. It's a lovely DAC, honestly. In fact, like I said, I think this will be the new DAC to beat under $1,000. But then going into the other aspects of it, I found it to be pretty dynamic. The punchiness of it was really good, and the percussions and low end, and just like the imaging and how it the transients went back and forth. Granted, obviously your headphones and or speakers will factor into that mostly. I kind of got ahead of myself a bit there. The chain I was using for speakers, I was mostly using my kefs. So that's a kef into the name right there, and that's more or less I lost my amp. And then I was actually utilizing the Wim Pro for streaming, and that thing is fantastic for a little streamer, for a cheap little streamer. I'm always blown away at how good that is for the price. And then for my headphone setup, it was the Centaurus with the Caldera closed mostly. I also played with the Verite closed, my Bokeh closed, Atrium opens, HD800s with my SDR mod on there, and just a couple other random headphones here and there. But mostly I was kind of playing with the Caldera closed because I liked the fact that it has a little more of that neutral sound signature with being slightly warmer with the ZMF house sound, but it let me kind of hear what the DAC was hear what the DAC was putting out a little bit more. But that was played into the Pietis Maximus, which does have a little bit of a more neutral warm signature as well, so take those into account. And that was my main chain for listening and evaluating what the Topping Centaurus was capable of. So that's sound. And music tracks I was listening to, just a couple of them I'll throw your way to get an idea of some of the things I was hearing. Talib Kweli, Get By. Pay attention to the snaps and how crispy those are. So it's a lot of like these in the background, and then the bass line, and then just the overall beat and piano is just really excellent. And some of these actually was grabbing from music league I'm a part of, which is super fun. It's kind of like I guess if you do like those sports leagues, but it's with audio, so you pick tracks and everyone votes, and it's a real fun little deal. It's music league, so Google that. But anyways, Talib Kweli, Get By. Like I said, pay attention to the snaps and how the piano is, and the percussion and what have you. It's just real crispy in a good way. Next track up, this one's really interesting. This one is by Polachek, and by the way, I'll be linking everything down below for all these tracks. But Polachek, and this is Bunny is a Writer. Not normally something I would dig on usually, but basically it's a remix by Nikki Nair, Satellite remix. And the things to pay attention to is all the digitized like pops and synths and whistles that are kind of happening. And it's still kind of like, for headphones, it's still kind of like close by. A stage isn't that great on it. The imaging is pretty good though. Like that's the part that you need to focus on, is just how the synths and the pops and the little like whistles and what have you are going around and moving across back and forth. It's just fun. It's just fun for that. Like the fact that it's just very 3D almost, with all the different like digital pops and synths and what have you. Next one up will be Calligraphy by Saba, and this is a hip hop track. And the thing you want to pay attention is the bass, obviously, because bass, hip hop, delicious. But the bass and the background percussion, also the piano comes in there, which is really lovely. And there's also a nice brass kind of in the background a little bit more. And I'm a big brass, I love brass, like so trumpets, and I know they're technically like wind whistle, but like you have like the saxophones, that kind of stuff. Not specifically with this one, but I love that kind of sound, like that metallic brassy. It's just fantastic. I love it a lot. But anyways, that one's a really fun one for listening to that bass, get a nice big bass hit in the beginning in there. And then obviously it's a hip hop, so pay attention to his vocals if that's what you're inclined to. But the thing I take away from that track the most is the bass. Right, so for the fourth track will be Takuya Kuroda, and hopefully I didn't butcher that name, but it's Takuya Kuroda, and the song I was listening to was Rising Sun. And the thing with this one is, speaking of brass, is like just that, the trumpet and just the jazzy bluesy, it's just love it. Fantastic track. And this was one that actually was introduced by that music league I was talking about before. Someone submitted it as, I believe, for the brass round, so voting on different brass instruments, and it's a fantastic track. Really dug on it. Those are my couple of tracks. My final thoughts are, who is this for? I definitely think, like I just said, in sound and everything else like that, my thought process on it is under $1,000, you want to be able to be in more control of what you're doing with your DAC, that kind of thing. This is really hard to beat. In fact, I would say it's the new one to beat outside of the Cyan2 as a set it and forget it. In fact, I do think the Cyan2 personally has a better sound, just ever so much. Something there that the Cyan2 and or the Spring 3 or there's components or something's going on there where it just sounds a little richer, a little more warm, a little more, I don't know, like I said, there's that audiophile magic. I'm gonna do the audiophile, make things up, as Skeeb was saying too, but like words, but like there's just there's something there that I can't quite put my finger on that just it edges out the Centaurus as far as the proper Holo Cyan2 and the Spring 3. I mean, definitely the Spring 3. That's a much higher step up from this one. Also, something to take into account is the build quality for the Centaurus compared to the, I don't have the Cyan2 here, but the Cyan2 is definitely a bigger case, has the big copper. There's just a attention to detail when it comes to like the quality of materials and that kind of thing. It's definitely a night and day difference. Like this feels almost cheap comparatively to the Cyan2 and definitely to the Spring 3. And that's not a knock against the topping. Like this is solid. It's aluminum. It's light, but it's not to say that heavy means better. But the Cyan2 and like the Holo stuff just has this like high attention to detail and really high quality materials that go into it. Whereas I feel like this is good material. Like this, it'd be like the difference between like an S plus or S tier product with quality materials versus like an A plus materials and product kind of deal. This does feel almost toyish in comparison to the Holo audio stuff as far as like materials and feel of it and what have you. This is the one to beat for anything under $1,000 or $1,000 range. It comes down to this and the Cyan2 for me personally. I do think both have their place. I did prefer this actually in my speaker setup, but that also could be because I'm just preferring speakers more and more these days. When I get a chance to listen to my speakers, I tend to want to listen to those over my headphones. But I do still listen to headphones majority of the time just because life, wife, kid, all that fun stuff, video games, it's just more efficient to use headphones in general. So yeah, I think that's more or less it. I think this is the new DAC to beat under $1,000 for sure, and it's right there with the Cyan2. It's a cool DAC, and I definitely recommend it. I don't have any problems with it. Other than it being just a slightly brighter and slightly more neutral sounding, in my opinion, to the Cyan2 stuff, once you take those comparisons away, this thing's an excellent DAC, and it does everything that I'd ever want it to do. So I guess I'll let everybody have their morning, afternoon, or evening back. All right. Cheers, everybody. See you on the next one. Talib Kweli. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. I'm trying to, what do I do with my hands? What do I do with the Centaurus while I'm talking? My God, Tyler, flipping A. Wow. Just, God damn it. Words.